Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm going to be keeping the tech running tonight. I've got some good news for you, though. If you stick around to the end of our session, you'll have a chance for a giveaway from our sponsor, the Canada West Mountain School. Apparently, I can't remember what they're called. Your cameras and mics are off for this session, but we still want to hear your comments. On your screen is a question mark button or a question box. Use it to post anything you want to tell us or ask a question and we'll answer online or in the Q&A part of the presentation. Actually, let's give it a try right now. Find the question area and let me know where you're joining us from. So just type in Quebec City or something like that. I don't know. While you're doing that, to get us started, please welcome the Executive Director of AdventureSmart in BC, the tip of the SAR prevention iceberg, none other than Sandra Riches.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to talk a very little bit tonight because our guests are who you're here to see. But I would like to share my gratitude for joining you tonight from the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. I've been with the program since 2004. And I'm also very grateful for that opportunity to work closely with the 78 search and rescue groups, the 3,000 search and rescue volunteers who respond to 2,000 search and rescue calls every year. We've got 3 of those 3,000 search and rescue volunteers here tonight, and we're going to go over a few things, some basic information about what we share. You may have seen our messaging before, but it never hurts to have a friendly reminder, or maybe tonight is an introduction to that. And then our guests tonight, which I'll introduce individually, they are going to share the specifics about their regions and how they make that happen in their particular region. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a session here. Oh, 2 seconds. We did this earlier. And I will kick it off with some basic information about, I'm going to play tag for a second and talk at the same time because it worked earlier before and my system is a little bit slower. You know, our messaging is the same no matter if you see us in person, if you see us at the trailhead, on social media, or when tech is being funny. Give me 2 seconds. We're in business. And tonight is the kickoff of that series. Tonight is the kickoff of part of our series for this winter, which includes 8 presentations, webinars, events, whatever you want to call our e-learning here. And this is a great way to kick it off with our guests. But before we do that, let's just share some information basically about what we want you to do for every adventure, any season, anytime, no matter how long or short your adventure is. The 3 T's, you've probably heard us talk about this before. It's really crucial that you trip plan. That consists of getting yourself ready in your group, going over all the logistics, literally, physically, checking the weather in major detail, and gathering all that and sharing it with an emergency contact. We have a trip plan app for that. So trip planning consists of the pre-adventure, having the right training for the activities that you choose to do, if it's certification based, like an avalanche skills training, or if it's mentorship, hanging out with someone who is better at that activity than you. And that continues through your whole life of your outdoor adventures. And then taking those essentials with you and adding season and sport specific gear. That's what we call our 3 T's. The app is super easy. It's free to anyone and you can use it anywhere in Canada. And that's available on our website. And there's the page right there, or just scan over that QR code right now. This will gain you access to that resource, that tool. Then you can share your trip plans with your emergency contact every single time you go. When you get back, trip completed, and everyone's notified. It's an excellent, excellent resource, and it makes it easy. And if you're curious what goes into the trip plan, the app makes it easy because you just have to fill in the fields. It's very simplistic. Accidents happen. Incidents do happen 2,000 times a year in British Columbia. And it's important to follow those 3 T's, trip plan, train, and take those essentials. But if something does happen, you need to also know what to do in an emergency. So the stop analogy is what we need you to really think about. So you're stopping, thinking, observing, and planning. And getting into those finer details of this, it allows you to stop physically, and that stops us mentally a little bit. It slows us down. It allows us to assess the situation. You're thinking about, why did we have this emergency? Why have we stopped? Observations are checking, are we in a safe location? Are we below a cornice, near a tree well, near fast moving water, an edge of a cliff? Our observations are key. That includes our party as well. And then planning with the essentials you have in your pack, the communication devices you've brought with you, and that plan you put in place for the what if. We want you to think of the what ifs. And it's really important messaging to share with everyone pre-adventure. Follow those 3 T's and also know what to do in an emergency. Remember, the number to call is 911. Phone as soon as you can. Ask for police, explain your situation and your location. And just last but not least, there is no charge for search and rescue. There is no charge for search and rescue. As we roll right into our first guest, I'd like to introduce Justin J. Darbyshire. Born on the coast and raised in the Kootenays, Jay possesses a deep passion for exploring and getting out there, and all through outdoor recreation and his work. Actually, he's been a member of the Grand Forks Search and Rescue for 5 years, in addition to being a SAR volunteer. Jay is also a volunteer ski patrol at Red Resort. That keeps you busy, Jay, I'm sure. And is also dispatcher with Kiefer Lake cat skiing at the lodge there, which is, you know, your work and your volunteer and everything just rolls right into one. His background in public and commercial recreation gives him a broad perspective on risk management and public safety in the mountains, especially in the context of winter safety. Thanks, everyone. That was my introduction. Get comfy. We've got 3 wonderful guests here, and Jay, you can take it away.
If you go to the introduction slide. So first off, I just want to talk a little bit about Grand Forks, so everybody kind of knows the context of where I'm from. We're a small rural community halfway between Osoyoos and Nelson. We're on the border between the Okanagan and the Kootenays, kind of a rolling, sort of hilly, mountainy region. Highway 3 goes right through the bottom of the area, if anybody's ever driven the Crow's Nest. And yeah, lots of river valleys, lots of back roads. So we tend to do a lot of kind of like remote rescues, but not in the sense of people totally lost, but definitely like people that are prepared, but they're way out there and we're going to bring them home. We're a pretty diverse team. We have a winter team, an ice rescue team, swiftwater team, and we also participate in a regional mountain rescue team. Being a small community in the West Kootenays, we actually collaborate very closely through mutual aid with a lot of teams in our region, including Roslyn, Castlegar, Nelson, Caslow, Arrow Lakes, and South Columbia. And myself, I was raised in the region. I just recently returned. I have a big background in adventure tourism. As Sandra said, 5 years with GF SAR, and I'm one of our ground search team leaders and our GSAR trainer. Next slide. Sandra? Perfect. Oh, back. 1, sorry. All right, so I want to hit this on stop, like Sandra presented. I'd really like to hit home on the P part, on the plan part. So something that I carry with me everywhere I go that's from my university days is proper planning and preparation prevents potential problems. So planning is everything. It's really the key thing we can do to ensure we're ready for any sort of adverse circumstances or any sort of incidents that occur when we're out recreating. It also helps us as search and rescue members respond capably when we know what's happening. So that's part of your planning process. So never plan for what you want to go right, always plan for what could go wrong. And these are some of these lessons are things we learn in search and rescue through training and through responding. Doesn't just mean planning for the obvious. It means planning for the circumstances that are very unobvious and a lot of times. Understanding risks of the activities you do. You want to mitigate and manage risks. We can't erase risk completely from recreating in the wilderness, but we can mitigate and manage them using skills and using techniques. Redundancy and backing up. Everything we do when we're making a plan, we want to have a backup for our backup plan. We want to make sure we have redundancies that we're prepared for. If this goes wrong and then this also goes wrong, what am I going to do then? That planning is very in-depth. I don't want to overload the idea, but it's an important thing to understand. And then even if you've got the perfect plan, you think you've thought of everything you can possibly think of, if you do everything else wrong, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. So, even if you've done everything you think you can do, the most important thing you can always do is leave that trip plan. Leave a specific, hard, good, not good timeline with somebody else. Let them know where you're going. Have locations set out where you could possibly be if you're on a longer trip. Those are the things that are really going to help us respond and have good outcomes when we respond to a search and rescue incident. So next slide. So survival. You've been out there, you've had your plan, you're out on your activity, something goes wrong, you've got an incident. There's 3 key components to survival. It's kind of like the survival triad: skills, tools, and mindset. Tools are the things you can bring with you. They're those essentials that they talk about in AdventureSmart programming, having those things that are able to help you respond to an incident. Skills are the knowledge you possess to use those tools at hand. It's training. It's not just certifications, it's practice. So you need skills to use your tools. Having all the tools means nothing if you don't have practice skills or learned skills to actually use those tools in an incident or in a circumstance where you need to use them. Mindset. This is a very important component of the kind of survival triad. Mindset is what gives you the ability to apply your skills and tools effectively. If you don't have that will to survive, or you're not maintaining a level of calmness, in an emergent situation, it's a really hard thing to do. But that mindset, trying to bring yourself to a center, calm minds will always prevail. Sitting there, assessing, looking at your plans you've had, thinking back to the practice you've done, looking at the tools you've got with you. The mindset is what's going to let you really use those apply those skills and use those tools. Remaining calm, the will to survive, the will to live. That's a really important component. It's one thing, we can't buy a mindset, we can't train a mindset, but we can work on that and think about it, in our daily lives and prepare ourselves for eventualities. That's going to let those other 2 things really work together. We can go slide. Perfect. So what do tools look like and what does practice look like? So bushcraft is kind of a cool thing. Some people may have heard of, there's lots of creative ways to create fire. There's really creative ways to build shelters. You can spend lots and lots of time building really complex things. But one thing we teach in ground search and rescue training to all of our members in training is, it's basics, it's not bushcraft. When we're talking about surviving in the wilderness, we want to really hit home on the really simplest ways to, build fire, create shelter, apply first aid, do signals. So things like fire lighting, my fire kit's about yay big. It's a little Nalgene bottle. Always having 3 ways to light fire, never having just one. So I carry a fire starter, a tiny Bic lighter, and a whole pack of stormproof matches. So always having 3 ways to light fire is a really, really important thing. They may not always work. You might have something going wrong. There's a lot of commercial fire starters. These are some here. There's a lot of options out there. So not, whittling sticks and trying to, use like magnesium ferro rod fire starters. Bring a lighter, bring 2 lighters. They're light, they're small. If one you drop in the snow, it gets wet, you can pick up the other one out of your pocket. They don't take up a lot of space. Backups to backups, again, that redundancy piece. If you're in a group, making sure everybody's got fire starting stuff. If 2 people fall in a creek and their packs get wet, you've got one dry pack, it's still got dry matches, it's got a dry lighter in it. Shelter's kind of the same way. Blue tarps are something we all carry in SAR. I carry 2. Why carry 1 when you can carry 2 and they're only about that big? That's a 5 by 8 blue tarp. Takes up no space in my pack. It's got multiple uses if you're responding to medical or building a shelter. So yeah, that's kind of the thing with all of this, is really having those redundancies and having multiple uses for pieces. When it gets to first aid, the really important thing we learn when you're doing traumatic first aid in the wilderness, and we do this throughout ski patrol and SAR and even in the guiding context, is hypothermia management is the biggest thing we're managing when we're out there. If you get cold, your survival outcomes go down drastically, even if you're injured. So when you're dealing with incidents of injury, it's really important to keep in that mind, no matter what your level of training is, keep the patient warm, keep the injured individual warm, keep yourselves warm. Hypothermia is going to be the thing that takes everybody out in the end. So, you know, keeping warm as much as possible. So that's where that shelter and fire are the key things, and having those backups and redundancies. So practice is kind of an integral component, as I said, to all of this. It's important to practice scenarios in the places where things are going to happen. It's important to practice with the individuals you're going to be out there with, not practicing with yourself. Practice with the individuals you recreate with. Create scenarios, get out there, do it in the woods, you know, use your tools, use your skills, apply them in realistic situations. And when you're done practicing, debrief. This is one of the most important things you can do. Every time we have a SAR incident, or if we're having a SAR practice, we debrief. We sit down as a team and we decide in a critical but productive way what could have gone better, what we could have done differently, and how the next time we ensure there's even going to be better outcomes. And that's something you can even do as an individual recreationist, is always, when you're practicing your skills, take a positive critical mindset and say, what could I have done differently and better? And those are my key takeaways. I think those are really important pieces I've learned as a SAR member, as a recreationist, and things I'd love people to take home through this presentation. Thank you, Sandra.
There we go. Thanks, Jay. That was awesome. I made some notes there. Actually, it's you know, I've been with the AdventureSmart program since 2004, so we're into our 18th year, and I've had the pleasure and honor to work, collaborate, volunteer, hang out with people like Jay and our other guests joining us, and there's always, every single time, something to learn, and especially from those like Jay and the two others that are on the ground doing what they do. So Jay, thanks for your service in relation to SAR response. Thanks for putting on a SAR prevention hat tonight, for lack of what I can see is actually on that hat. And I really appreciate that. That's super. So I'm going to stop sharing. And before we jump into our next guest, I'd like to have some participation from the audience, if I could. Jay, I was texting you, or pardon me, Scott, I was texting you to see if we could pull up a poll. Hang on 2 seconds, Devon. I just wanted to ask a question of our audience. There we go. Which do you think are the top 3 reasons for search and rescue tasks in British Columbia? So there's 3 commonalities for the top 3 reasons of search and rescue. So all those 2,000 calls that happen, they're entered into a provincial data management system. So SAR gets to use that data, I get to use that data for messaging. So what do you think the top 3 are? Lack of proper gear, exceeding abilities, fitness or skills, getting lost in bad navigation, poor navigation, no trip plan, getting injured. There's 3 that are the most common. So let's see what you've got there.
This is really entertaining watching as people are voting. The percentage is just going wild. So people are getting in on different kinds here. So pick your top 3. Only 3, please, and we'll give you another little bit here. Once we get over 70% voted, we will lock the poll.
And Scott, just confirming my screen's off and Devon's got controls.
Yeah, she does.
Beautiful. Nice.
Marvelous. So let's close the poll here. Here are the results.
I love getting these results so fast. My goodness, I love it. So lack of proper gear. So over 50% of you, 56, thought that was in the top 3. Exceeding abilities, 63%. Interesting. Getting lost, bad nav, 70. No trip plan, 43. And getting injured. Nicely done. That's really exciting for me, for someone who's been sharing this message for a very long time, including search and rescue. So the top 3 are in this order. The first one's injury. The first one is injury, no matter the season. We're rolling into winter, it's still injury. Summertime for hikers, injury. The highest user group that requests search and rescue in the winter is actually snowmobilers and then backcountry skiers. The second most reason for search and rescue in British Columbia is getting lost or disoriented. So that's the getting lost and bad nav. That's a biggie. So the first one for injury, we could think about first aid, proper clothing, proper gear. How can we prevent an injury or treat and assess and risk manage injury? The second, getting lost and disoriented. Can you navigate successfully? And forget your phone for forever, if you could, in a roundabout way for this scenario, is think about hard copy, map, and compass. My goodness, you could go old school. North isn't changing anytime soon. And if you know how to use those two pieces, you can navigate to reach your destination. And your destination is always home. The peak is only halfway. And the third most common reason there is exceeding abilities. That one's a little bit trickier, right? Because navigation is all about training. The first one's about first aid. The second one's decision making. So just some more data. We'd love to share it. And thanks again, Jay, for joining us. Oh, perfect. The camera's off. And we are going to move on to our second guest here. We have Devon. Devon loves the outdoors and aims to make the most of every day as an avid outdoor enthusiast. Ice and rock climbing, mountaineering. She's just a wealth of outdoor adventure, definitely. She graduated from Concordia University with a BA specializing in human environment and a minor in urban studies. She enjoys a wonderful career, somewhere where I used to work a long time ago. BC Parks as a park ranger. Her passion for recreation, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and conservation all come together in her current role. We're really grateful to have Devon here from Lions Bay Search and Rescue and Sea to Sky Corridor, which is a busy region for search and rescue, and in one of the busiest regions in Canada for search and rescue. Without further ado, Devon, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, for that lovely intro. We'll hop ahead. Hi, everyone. I'm Devon. Really quickly, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am coming to you from Squamish, so living and working under the shadow of Enchke in the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So without further ado, this is me. So I'm, again, Devon Denis. My base position in the BC government is as a recreation services officer with BC Parks. So here I'm actually with AdventureSmart and our amazing summer student rangers doing a little bit of outreach for folks at the Chief Trailhead in Squamish. And I'm also with Lions Bay Search and Rescue. And we have the House on Crest Trail at the top of Lions Bay. That is actually a provincial park, but also where a significant portion of our search and rescue calls come from. So yeah, we're talking about winter tonight. So just from personal experience with BC Parks as well as with Lions Bay Search and Rescue, there's a couple of things that can get you into trouble really quickly out in the backcountry. This is one of my photos just from a quick night tour up to Red Heather Shelter. If any of you from the Lower Mainland are familiar, it's a great, easy, when it's not those conditions, trail to do. So yeah, sometimes the weather can turn against you. Trip planning, Jay already mentioned it as well as Sandra, but that's a key one. If you don't do it, you can get into trouble. Inappropriate clothing. That's a big one for Lions Bay SAR. We see it all the time, and I'll talk about it more, but shoulder season is really a time, so kind of right now and then in the spring are two of the times when we see a significant number of calls where people, it's maybe sunny in Vancouver, sunny at sea level, and maybe warmish. Once you're up in the mountains, it's a completely different story. And we have a really good one from last fall in Lions Bay where two folks were hiking around, got off trail below the Lions, thought they saw an FSR, and so Forest Service Road, and we're trying to follow it down, but it was so grown in that they got quite wet from all of the branches, and because they were in cotton clothing, as it started to get dark and hit freezing, their clothes actually froze solid. So that's what happens when you wear cotton clothing and it gets wet. You can also get it wet from sweating. So really big one, cotton's great for some things, definitely not for winter recreation. Another big one for us is we have a lot of pretty quick and easy calls, thank goodness, where folks are okay, but they're unprepared for short days. They don't have a headlamp. They didn't check when sunset was, which these days is around 4:15. So it's pretty early. It's really easy to get caught unawares out there. And like I said earlier, the conditions at sea level do not equate to the conditions up high. So a big one from my coworkers in BC SAR is when we're debriefing with our subjects, so the people that we rescue after a call, we ask them like, hey, how did you hear about this trail? And a lot of times it's just friends or family. It's not a great hiking book like 110 hikes around southwestern BC. You know, there's a lot of really great hikes that have great information. We have great mapping apps in this area as well. Exploring the Coast Mountain on skis is an excellent winter resource for not just skiers, but also snowshoers. So yeah, that's a big one for us, is people not getting their information from good sources and then getting into trouble because they saw a really cool picture on Instagram and wanted to go take that same picture, but maybe didn't actually research what it took to get there. From a BC Parks perspective, that happens a lot at Panorama Ridge up in Garibaldi and Black Tusk. I can't speak for Squamish Search and Rescue. I do help them on mutual aids every now and then, but yeah, a lot of folks see these gorgeous pictures online and want to experience it for themselves, don't realize that it's actually a 30-kilometer round trip, and then for winter don't realize that they're getting into avalanche terrain. So a lot of really important things to consider when you're going out and planning your adventure. So one thing that you can do to make sure that not just you, but others are safe when they're out enjoying the backcountry around you is taking an avalanche course. I'm sure it's been said many a time here in AdventureSmart, but I can't say it enough. And one thing to add is, I know it's expensive to take a course, and that is a barrier. So with that in mind, Avalanche Canada has a really great tutorial. It's called Avy Savvy. It's free. It does take a few hours to do. A lot of us in government, it's actually mandated to, like, we have to take part of our training every year. And I recommend taking it every year at the start of your season, because there's always something that you're going to forget, and it just refreshes your skills. They have great info. There's like little trip. You like draw a line what you think your route should be up a slope, and it tells you if you're right or wrong based on the avalanche risks in that photo. That's so helpful. So if you can't afford an AST 1 or 2 course, and they have those for skiing and snowshoeing, do the Avy Savvy tutorial at a minimum. This photo here is of myself and a coworker. We are above the Blackcomb Glacier, which enters into the Garibaldi Provincial Park backcountry. So many of you might have heard of the Spearhead Traverse. So this is one of the accesses to the Spearhead backcountry and that more and more popular traverse. So we were just chatting with everybody that day. We got there early and we just counted the number of people that we spoke to, and we're just checking like, hey, you're going into the backcountry. Do you have your beacon or your transceiver, shovel, and probe with you? You know, the basic winter avalanche safety gear. And then we also asked, have you taken any avalanche skills training? So we spoke to about 150 people that day alone. We've also done this same exercise at the Flute Summit entrance to Garibaldi backcountry on the way to Keith's Hut, which many of you might have heard of as well, Whirlwind Peak and all that. And it's actually even less people have transceivers on that side because they don't realize it's the backcountry. So it's typically about 20% of folks have their avalanche equipment and training And so for me personally to be aware of that, when you're in the backcountry and realize people around you might not have the training, just making sure you're giving people space, because you don't know if they could get you in trouble by a mistake they make. This is also at Whistler doing a crevasse rescue course, and I can't say it enough, but I would absolutely recommend getting training wherever you can. Again, there's the free options like Abby Savvy. I can't speak for places like Grand Forks and Jay's crew, but we have in the Lower Mainland here, we have a couple awesome groups like the Alpine Club of Canada, BCMC, British Columbia Mountaineering Club, and lots of other fantastic groups that, you know, you can meet other folks for free to go meet and practice skills and gain new knowledge on backcountry safety. And just like Jay said, and I'm sure Julie will say, practice, practice, practice. I do all this every year. Search and rescue, we train every week on these skills. Doesn't mean you have to, but it can't hurt, and it's also really fun. So why not? And then lastly, one thing that's near and dear to my heart is a lot of recreationalists in the winter like to bring their dogs with them, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not bringing your dog. It shouldn't be. Also, please don't put a beacon on your dog. In most cases, that would be a horrible thing to dig up a dog instead of a person in an avalanche. I've seen that on social media. It's a conversation that maybe we can chat about later. But if you're on skis or with snowshoes, you can cut your dog super, super easily. So making sure that you have the right first aid gear for your dog. And then also respecting that, you know, some people might not want to see a dog out there, or there could be other dogs out there. So just always keeping a leash handy. And obviously that's my BC Park side saying that as well. So thanks for bearing with me. Yeah, and then I'll quickly end with the last example. So I was on a mutual aid with Squamish Search and Rescue a couple of years ago for somebody who had gone missing overnight on a just a simple day out to Elfin Lakes and back. So for those of you not familiar with Elfin Lakes, it's in Garibaldi Provincial Park. It is a fairly mellow 11-kilometer ski one way and back, not too much elevation change, pretty limited avalanche, if you stay on the trail, avalanche danger. And then the park rangers, the amazing park rangers, have done a pole route in the past to help skiers find the safe route that avoids the avalanche paths. So not sure if that'll happen this winter, but it's always nice to have those extra supports to help you stay safe. But so one person had gone missing on their way back. No one knew what happened. The only way that we knew that they were missing is their roommate said they didn't come home. So this was middle of winter, I think it was January. So it had been really cold that night, like -20. So we were very concerned about this individual. Didn't really know where to start either, because that's an 11-kilometer trail. They could have really ended up pretty much anywhere along that trail. So myself and a partner start hiking up one of the drainages, the Masheter drainage up from Alice Lake. And we're hiking. There's another crew in a helicopter looking down for signs in the snow, and they start seeing some blood, and then they see some skis higher up lodged against a tree. And there was this whole mystery because the footprints were in ski boots at one point and then switched to bare feet, and then there was nothing. And so it was kind of a mystery. Like, what happened that they took their boots off and then bare feet and then blood and then nothing? And keeping in mind, it had been -20 overnight, so bare feet, it's a little concerning. So we kept hiking up the drainage to try to connect with where the last footsteps had been, and we connected, and still no individual. And then we get a call a little bit later that the person had actually hiked out and met up with some snowshoers. So they had found their footsteps back once it was light enough out and followed their own footsteps out, but they had left their skis behind. So had a heck of a time getting out there. And upon further debriefing, it was found that they had survived the freezing cold night by hopping foot to foot just to stay warm. So, you know, they didn't have all the essentials with them. They were smart enough to keep moving to stay warm and make it through the night. And they were very, very lucky to get through. And that's a really positive scenario for everyone involved. So that's my one good story about winter. And that's
Devon, I've got to ask, like, so we're saying that the person's their feet were stuck, and so they took themselves out of their boots and were walking around barefoot?
It wasn't exactly clear why they took their ski boots off. I think it was too hard to hike down this really steep creek, and so because it was like steep, icy, bouldery, so they took their boots off to to try to find their way down easier, and then obviously bare feet on ice didn't go any better, so went back up, collected the boots, and found their way out.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's all from me. Over to amazing Julie.
Thanks, Devon. That was awesome. I love the story. I think we can share stats, we can share our material, but to listen to a story is there's just something else about it, right? Everybody kind of just leans in a little bit, and you relax, and you listen to what you had to say there. Yeah, I had the same question, Scott. So thanks for piping in and double checking that that's what they did. Interesting, nonetheless. Thanks for all you do at Lions Bay there, Devon, and your whole team, and for helping us when we go out and do trailheads or when we've worked up at the Abbey Hut on Blackcomb with patrol up there, and we've all collected together with Lions Bay and done demos with the transceivers for guests, and really it's been a great collaboration with Lions Bay. Thank you for that. Our third guest is Julie. You can see her here. Let me just do a quick intro and then it's all yours, Julie. Julie's an avid backcountry skier, and I've done some research. She does a little bit more than skiing, so you might want to ask a little bit more about her grand adventures. And so she's a backcountry skier and search and rescue volunteer with North Shore Rescue. She enjoys traverses and long ski days and loves her local coast range. She trains North Shore Rescue's new recruits. We call them members in training. So Julie takes care of that piece there and leads the team's mapping efforts. She's also training as a member of North Shore Rescue's helicopter-based rescue Class D team. Professionally, she studies and manages natural hazard risk for the federal government. We're fortunate to have Julie here as our third guest tonight, and I look forward to hearing more about what you've got to say tonight, Julie, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and hello. I am speaking to you today from North Vancouver, which is the unceded ancestral territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. Story. So today I just started this thinking about where our incidents come from on the North Shore. And I wanted to highlight a few sources for you. Sunsets are a big cause of incidents for us, not the sunsets themselves, but that they happen early, especially in winter, and they often catch people unaware. Also, we got deep snow. Sometimes travel can become very difficult, especially what can be surprising after a big snowfall for people on trails. This can also change throughout the day. Sometimes things are really and your elevation, and you can experience completely different conditions, including a lot more or a lot less ice. Avalanches. The North Shore doesn't have a lot of big open alpine terrain, but we have a lot of small avalanches that occur every single year, and probably every single storm cycle here on the North Shore. They happen near and on popular hiking and skiing routes, and they can have huge consequences in the treed and gully type of terrain. On the North Shore is navigation. We have a coastal climate, and we often get conditions that I like to call ping pong ball, where you can't see a thing and it feels like your head is stuck inside of a ping pong ball. Even with slightly better visibility than this, people can get turned around and lost of your bearings. Finally, we got a lot of out of bounds exercises. We have 3 local ski hills, and people often chase fresh snow off of marked runs or trails. They might not have the equipment or maybe the knowledge to get back in bounds, and they can run into trouble. I like to say that the mountain doesn't know that there is slack country. You're either in a resort or controlled. And last but not least, we've got injuries, and these can happen to anyone at any time. Post-holing through snow crust can twist the strongest knees or ankles, so you have to be ready if that happens. So talking about being ready if or when something happens and you need help, you have to be prepared to look after yourself for a while. If there's really good weather and you have a critical need, we can be most places on the North Shore in hours, but across the province, many places have much larger distances to travel, and that can be much higher. If there's bad weather, we often can't use a helicopter, and then I guarantee you it will take us several hours to walk to your location. But here's the thing, if there are really dangerous conditions, or perhaps a helicopter isn't available, we can be even days away. Now this rarely happens, but the average SAR call in BC lasts 8 hours. You need to be prepared to sit tight for a while as your sweat cools and you stop exercising. So always bring whatever you need for this possibility. This here is a photo of us stretcher carrying a severely injured subject by foot last winter. They were very lucky that passersby heard them yelling and that we were able to access them in difficult avalanche conditions. So something I mentioned in my first slide, navigation. Navigation isn't just following a trail. It's knowing what to do and how to get around if you find, say, snow on the trail. Maybe more there than was on your way out. Maybe your tracks are covered. Or if you find fog or clouds or precipitation in your view that can really make the horizon disappear and drop visibility down to tens of meters. Or changing conditions. You might start an adventure during a clear day, but the conditions might change and you might end up with those clouds that we talked about earlier. So what are your plans to find and stay on the trail? Are your plans waterproof? And if your plans involve a cell phone, do you have a battery pack and a backup option? Research ahead, check the avalanche conditions, the snow conditions, and the parking and access hours. Bring your essentials and be ready for surprises, especially surprises in conditions. Microspikes and snowshoes are key for recreating in the winter. You might encounter icier or snowier conditions than you expect. And a special shout out for skiers on the North Shore. Ski crampons are essential in my opinion. You never know just how much dust is on that crust and just where you find that crust. So something that's really important to me in having a good adventure and that I find is essential in a group's success is how they approach their day. So when you go out for your day, how are you? Yeah.
Hi, my apologies for interrupting you. Your audio is cutting in and out. Can you turn off the webcam on your side, and it might give a little bit more bandwidth for the audio. So you've turned it on, now turn it off, and let's see whether or not that helps a bit. Sorry, please continue.
Fingers crossed. Sorry about that. But yeah, when you go out for your day, how do you think about your day? And I think it's really important that the whole group is on the same page about this. Are you on a mission to get to a summit? Are you out to enjoy your friend's company? Or are you challenging yourself with fitness or looking for a sweet photo? So regardless of what you're after for the trip, I think we can all agree that your trip ends not at the summit, not at the photo point, but back at the car or back home. And to get back, there are 2 things I really recommend, and I've seen the impacts of success and failure in these things. So have a turnaround time. Know when you need to turn back, and make sure you and your group actually do it. If travel out to a location takes longer than you expect, turn around sooner. And even if you're meeting your trip partners for the first time that day, they are your trip partners for the whole adventure. So stay together as a group. And on both of those things, there is no summit and no adventure worth not getting back for. So aim to get back at the car, stay together, and just turn around whenever you need to. And lastly, be ready in case an accident happens. Be ready with your navigation to get back onto a route. Be ready to stay put for a while, and be ready to signal or call for help. Satellite may be required, or maybe you'll be lucky enough to have cell service. And I did promise a story, so here we go. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the North Shore, not a creature was stirring, not even a skier. I did not rewrite the whole poem for you, but I do want to tell you this story. It was actually Christmas 2021, and we got a call at North Shore Rescue shortly after sunset. A father, a mother, and their child had gone up Seymour Peak in the afternoon and had an awesome time. On the way down, the mother and daughter snowshoed down, and the father, a former ski patroller, skied down ahead of them. When the mother and daughter got back to their car, they didn't find the father waiting there. A while later, they called search and rescue. It had been snowing all day and avalanche conditions were dangerous. We dispatched up the hill and we checked for tracks of where this subject could have gone off trail. We found lots of tracks of other skiers, and we had some suspicions about where they were likely to be. A place called Suicide Gully is often where folks end up when they make navigational errors. We called out from the top of bluffs, and we searched via drone in the windows when the weather wasn't quite so bad. Avalanche conditions were too severe for us to travel into the gully. In our first few locations, we heard and we saw nothing, except we could really see how someone could lose their way with the type of weather that we were experiencing. On the last place that we checked, we heard a very faint voice from the gully below us, and that's actually a photo from the evening right there. We could barely hear each other, but we were able to find out that our subject was uninjured, just unable to travel back out of the gully. He had a few layers with him, and he settled in for the night. We tried to fly in via helicopter, but the weather was just too bad to get in. So we set up camp at the top of the bluff, and we waited with him for much the with our sleeping bag, our tarp, big puffy jackets, stove, and you can see there we have insulated underpads to sit quite comfortably on. The next morning, we were able to get into the gully, and we helped our skier make his way out. His return the next morning to his wife and daughter was a great Christmas present. And this is a happy ending story. And I think it's a good one that illustrates some of the things that all of our presenters have talked about this evening. And I do hope you were able to hear my audio for at least some of that, but I'm all done.
Thank you kindly. There's a whole bunch of questions. If everyone wanted to put their webcams back on, I've got a whole bunch of questions from a whole bunch of people. And I think it'd be great if we could take a look at them ourselves here. There we go. We're all together. Thank you very much. First of all, it's definitely really, really fun presentations from everyone. I know, first of all, I'll give one early on. Jay, people were wondering whether or not you're handing out all these skis to the people who are at the thing. Is that what's happening? Because if it is apparent, I have a lineup of people who have requested various things, and apparently Sandra's one of them. So what is the deal with the skis behind you?
This is the rental fleet for the lodge I work at. This is my job probably for the next couple of days, is waxing and tuning these.
Nice.
This is work behind me.
So now, this is me being completely selfish. I'm a cross-country skier. Do you do cross-country skis too? Can I bring them to you and you can straighten them out for me?
Not as much. I'm not that good at cross-country.
Okay, well, drat. Okay, so let's get on to the real questions here. Christina asked, with the wildfire risk that we have, how do we balance the wildfire risk and the idea of having fire supplies to start fires to keep ourselves warm? Anyone want to take that one?
I can jump in to start if that's okay, and anyone else can feel free. It's come up in the last few years based on what's happened in our province. I know in my time with AdventureSmart, 18 and a half years, that wasn't a question before. It was not that it wasn't a concern, but it wasn't as highlighted as it is now with our wildfire situations that we've experienced. So, Jay talked about fire starters and how many kinds you should have, and being prepared for that and understanding how you do that. And you know, we reinforce that message in our AdventureSmart presentations about being trained. Can you successfully start a fire with the rations that are in your pack, in the situation that you're in the conditions you are? What comes down to those, that sound decision making on everything that we've talked about tonight, but that sound decision making that you need to make when and if it's safe to do so, right? You're lost in the summer, it's extreme wildfire season, the province is on fire. Should you light a fire to keep warm that night? Probably not. You know, so really what I feel and what I've learned over the years is not everyone takes their situational awareness into their equation. And that can be for many reasons. You know, someone's lost, injured, or hurt, something's happened, right? And our minds change. The processes change, that decision. We can all sit like this and talk about these processes. We're warm, we're dry, we're comfy, we have the fake fire burning in the background, everything's good. And we can think very chronologically. We get out there though, we're cold, it's dark, we're wet, things are different, and you think differently. Hence, Jay mentioned going through those what ifs. So long story short, which I'm really good at, sorry, think about your situation, think about your situational awareness. Is it appropriate? What are the other implications of that decision, specifically to lighting that fire during the summer, I'm assuming we're talking about here.
So Jay, one of the things that you mentioned about planning, right? What kind of, before you leave, what kind of planning would you do if you thought that maybe it's not the time to be using fire?
So, like, obviously there's two things you can use fire for. One is signaling, one is for keeping warm. There's a lot of other ways to signal, whistles. Like, I have a lot of my camping stuff, I just have reflective cord on it. If we're looking for you at night and there's reflective things, we're looking at for you with flashlights, they hit reflective items. They're going to be bright and really bright and shiny if you've ever tested how reflective stuff works. Glow sticks are cheap and cheerful. Always having a glow stick in your pack. Like, even when I'm mountain biking, I have a little hip pack. I don't wear a backpack. I have a glow stick, a little tiny, like, cheap headlamp, and like an emergency blanket. I get the bigger ones. These are like a little bit pricier emergency blankets. They're a little bit thicker. They work a little bit better for keeping rain off of you. But like, if you're, say, in the Alpine in the summer, and you're obviously never going to light a fire in the middle of the summer in August to stay warm, but you're on like a big day hike and you're like, I want to be prepared. This is my overnight bivy kit, which is like a really thin mattress, a 5x8 blue tarp, and an emergency blanket, and that is enough for me to stay not comfortable, but not terribly uncomfortable in about 2 degrees, 5 degrees, if I've got some layers on as well. Like, that's gonna keep me alive if I have to stay overnight, or if I'm on some really crazy mission. And that's similar to what every SAR member carries something that looks like that in their pack, wherever we are, whatever we're doing.
Marvelous. I'm going to throw a question over to Devon. Devon, you were talking about transceivers. Do we have any particular models or types of transceivers that we recommend? I know there's different kinds. There's the passive reflective things that can be used to find people after an avalanche, and then there's the transceivers that you have. So what type of systems do you recommend at this point in time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the passive ones you're referring to are kind of like the Reco reflectors that you can get them typically in part of your ski jacket or ski pants. I think AdventureSmart has given them away as little tags that you can throw on a pack. I would say, our transceivers would not connect with that. So if all you have when you're in the backcountry is your little Reco reflector and you get caught in an avalanche, we're not going to find you. It takes specialized equipment, like a Reco device essentially, to come and find that. So I think it's great as like a secondary thing if you're lost, but I would never count on those passive. And those passive transceivers. I also wouldn't ever rely on a 2 antenna beacon, or sorry, transceiver. So there's these days all transceivers come with 3 antenna, so one this way, one that way, and one this way. Previously it was just two directions, so you were losing a lot of like capacity to get found at a quick within like the survival period, essentially. So I would recommend, if you have an older transceiver, I don't even know how old, folks, maybe like more than 10 years, but there's a likelihood it could maybe have only 2 antenna, and I would definitely upgrade to something a little bit newer. As far as brands and models go, and I can pass, I feel like Julie probably has a little bit more experience than me, but for in BC Parks, we typically use the Mammoet, Lions Bay SAR. We all have Black Diamond ones. They're all pretty excellent as long as you know how to use them and you practice with them and try them with other people's beacons. Like go out with your friends, hide one under a shovel somewhere, dig it deep, and just make sure that you know how to use the equipment that you do have.
Perfect. Thanks kindly. I'll throw one to Julie. Julie, a lot of people were interested in the North Shore Rescue mini series, and I had, by the way, that previous question was from Alan, so thank you very much for that. But we had a person who asked, like, are they doing any more of that Knowledge Network mini series thing?
Yeah, you will have to ask the producers. I am not a videographer. That is not my line of work. So yeah, feel free to shoot them a message. I think that it was hosted on the Knowledge Network and filmed by Pegleg. So ask the experts. I'm not sure.
So it doesn't sound like there's anything coming out in the next few weeks anyway that you know about, eh?
Correct.
Marvelous. I had another question, and maybe Julie, you could take this one. Tips for what to carry. This is from Nick in a first aid kit when going into the backcountry, trying to balance what you need and how much weight you're going to be carrying. I'm the worst person to ask, by the way. My first aid kit is massive.
Yeah, I think mine is too. So maybe what if we do popcorn style and the 2 other panelists? So I'll say one thing in my first aid kit that I really like is ski straps. I find them really helpful for holding various.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh, we lost Julie. So
Things
let's go
together.
over to Jay. Jay, what's next in your what's
Anybody
one or
else wanna
two things
chime in?
you like?
From a ski patroller perspective, you can never have enough triangle bandages. They just work for multitudes of basic injuries, and even if you're doing complex like splinting, or you're packaging somebody up into a stretcher, and we show up and we're like, man, does somebody else have a triangle bandage? Like, they work for so many things. And patrollers will usually have pocketfuls of, they're in every pocket that I have when I'm on the mountain. So yeah, they're infinitely useful, and they can be used as a fire starter.
You keep them dry enough, I'm sure. Devon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to, well, actually, I did a really fun first aid kit show and tell with a couple other backcountry folks a few weeks ago, where we all took out our winter kit and looked at everything. And I think I highly recommend that to folks, as well as meet up with your friends and see what everyone else has in their kits. You can maybe learn something. But I also, in the winter, I like to think about first aid from a trauma perspective. When you do pull somebody out of an avalanche, they're typically not in great shape. And so triangle bandages are awesome. Lots of super glue. That would be a good one. But stuff for trauma, so anything to shove in open wounds. And then for, again, with dogs, so having stuff that works with fur is really great. And that's more than one item. Sorry.
No, that's cool. I'll throw in something here, then I'll throw over to Sandra. I know in my first aid kit,
Okay.
I make sure I have things like a tourniquet. But I think what's really important is in your first aid kit, you need to have the training for it, because you don't just throw a tourniquet on something and you have no idea why you're doing it, right? And no tourniquets on the neck. That's a bad idea, right? You should know that before you even start. But going into this, I'd say trying to figure out what your first aid kit is without having had that first aid training is going at it backwards. You got to start with that first aid training, because it'll start making sense what you need based on the things that you're going to see. Sandra?
No, I was agreeing with you there. Those were all good points there. If you had a question for me, I'd be happy to answer. But the yeah, that's a key piece, right? We can carry all these essentials. We can have all this in our packs, and seasonal and sport specific gear. There's extra stuff I add to my basics when I'm mountain biking versus sledding, right? So that changes seasonally. It changes personally, and that personal component is a big one. Maybe you're on medication. Don't forget that piece that you might need to have, not just for the span of your adventure. Think about those what ifs, like Jay and Devon and Julie talked about. Outside of that window, think of what Julie mentioned, 8 hours. We know that's based on data. The average SAR call in BC is 8 hours. So if there's a certain time you needed that medication, make sure that that's with you. I can't go anywhere without these now, sadly enough. I can ride and do my thing and ski without them, but if I need to look at something small, I have a spare pair in my pack of these. That extra food, maybe it's your favorite trail mix, maybe it's your favorite chocolate, whatever that is. There's fun essentials, and then there's those extra season and sport specific, right? Definitely key pieces.
Absolutely. There was a question by Nicola who asked about suggestions for satellite equipment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat for people who want to see it. We had this great presentation on communications and signaling, and we talked about pretty much nothing but talking via satellite and what happens when your cell phone service doesn't work. So go ahead, take a look in that chat there, and it's just a pristine way of brushing up on all of the technologies that are available to you. So we'll keep that one for after, and just make sure put that in a bookmark somewhere so you can use it later. There was another question about the resources that each group has. Now, we have Julie here, and Julie is part of North Shore Rescue, and they're well-resourced, I will say. They're probably the envy from a resourcing perspective of most of the search and rescue groups in BC. But the question was, what kind of night vision or thermal imaging capabilities do various teams have, and how do they use them? And how does that impact the people who are playing in their area, what they should carry by way of night signaling devices? So why don't we start with NSR, who is our fanciest one, because I happen to know they've been doing some neat things with night vision recently, and whether or not there's any tips that NSR would start with. Go ahead, Julie.
For sure. I would first say that it is very difficult to rescue people at night, that not through ground search and rescue. So there's been expectations, because we do have some night capabilities. There have been expectations from some of our subjects and other group subjects that we can just fly in and grab people at night. But so we have the ability to fly one particular helicopter, which is not always available at night. And there are night vision goggles associated with the helicopter. We also do have that was mentioned earlier by Devon, and we have helicopter-based FLIR, which is infrared technology. But all of these pieces are just, they don't do it if we don't know where to look. So I'd really say, like, prevention of the incidents and leaving a trip plan, that's better than any technology we have. But at the end of the day, we do have night vision capabilities, and we can actually do hoist rescues at night, which is very new, and again, something that is only done when there's a real severe need for it. And that, like I mentioned in that story, only done in good weather, etc. And that's something that all of the search and rescue teams across the province, actually, we do share each other's capabilities. So I remember, I believe it was last summer, calling on Lions Bay Search and Rescue for assistance with a multiple day search that we had on Grouse Mountain. And similarly, the resource that North Shore Rescue has can be called by other teams. We often use other folks, avalanche professionals. So we do all share. And I think the standard kit that you should bring out with yourself is consistent across the province. And it includes a two-way satellite communication device if you are going out of cell service. Again, that's better than any way to spot you from a helicopter. And most importantly, it's the materials that you need to be self-reliant and wait overnight is the typical situation.
Thanks kindly. I think that trip plan, we really need to call that home, because if we're looking in, say, a 2 kilometer square, it's a heck of a lot easier than if you're looking in a 20 kilometer square. It's just, it's crazy. Jay, what type of things do you want your people to have so that they're more easily findable at night?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in my presentation a little bit, is like, you know, reflectiveness is actually one of the things that's going to help us the best, because even if we're bringing in helicopters, even if, you know, we're calling on North Shore Rescue, or teams in the province in extreme situations can call on 442 Squadron out of Comox, you know, we bring in the military. We've had to do it in Grand Forks once for a pretty unique incident, and you know, we have capabilities to do really crazy things, but it's often the simple things that are what actually makes the real difference. And that's, so like having some sort of signaling device, whether it's a flare or whether it's a flashlight or even just a signaling mirror, like being able to make yourself visible to people looking for you with light. Like when we're searching at night, it's the light that's going to help us find you. Is we have lights, you have reflectivity, we're going to find you in the bush if we're ground pounding on, like, by foot or by ski or whatever. So having some sort of ability to signal to us is actually really important. I mean, they were mentioning FLIR. FLIR picks up bears and deer and all kinds of animals, and in deep forest cover, you kind of have to discern what you're looking at depending on how high you are, and humidity affects it. Like there's the old essentials are kind of the really, really good things. If they do find you and you can signal them, they know you're a person and you could need help. You know, so back to the basics is always the way to go. From my perspective. Whistle is like whistle on everything.
And you can whistle for hours on end. You can only yell for like a minute or two, right? Before you start losing your voice. Devon, thermal clothing. People who aren't from BC, how would you recommend that they actually get dressed for the outdoors so that they can be ready if they're in a position where they have to be a little bit colder for a little bit longer than they would normally would?
That's a great question. I think in BC, well, in any part of Canada, really, layering is the way to go, and always carrying extra layers with you. I love carrying a change of socks, extra pair of gloves, extra shirt, depending on how much you sweat, and keeping in mind that this shirt should not be cotton ever. Nor should your base layer leggings or whatever you wear on your bottom underneath your shells. I like merino wool. I know it's a little bit expensive. It's getting a little bit cheaper at places like Costco. It just dries really quickly and stays warm when wet. Cheaper option is kind of anything polyester, like kind of Under Armour spandexy options, or a blend of either of those two. So yeah, if you are a person that does sweat a lot, I'd highly recommend bringing a change of base layer for when you've reached your halfway point or your lunch spot, and immediately changing into that, because things can go downhill really quickly if you are wet and you start cooling down after exercise. So yeah, Marina stays warm when wet, but in -20, anything's still gonna freeze. So that's a big one. Around here in the winter, down is fine and it's quite light. It also has a lot of loft, but it is more expensive. So it packs down really well, but as soon as it gets wet, so again, if you're a big sweater, like if you sweat a lot and it's under a shell, you could get it moist and you could lose some of that loft, and that's where you get your warmth down from, is the air that your own body heats between those really fine down feathers. So you know, if it's supposed to be damp conditions or you do sweat a lot, it might go keep down as kind of like your emergency or your extra layer to throw on when you're taking a water break or a snack break. Throw that on. I'm wearing just a synthetic light jacket right now, and this is my go-to all year pretty much. You can get thinner, thicker layers. So yeah, you have your base layer, you have like a fleece or a light insulated layer, and then your shell layer on top, and that's pretty typical. I wear a headband a lot of the time. Baseball hat's great too. Depends on, you know, how cool you want to look. But definitely always having some sort of head protection, because you lose so much of your heat out of the top of your head.
I'll throw one back to Sandra. We were talking earlier about fire hazards, and you'd brought that up. Someone was talking about flares and bear bangers. So do we think that they are useful on a trip? I personally have never even considered bringing an explosive on a trip. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I wouldn't bring explosives on a trip, because those are explosives. But is there a good, like, can you think of a good reason why you might want to bring that on an outdoor trip?
Well, you know, in that webinar that you posted for everyone in the communications, comms, and tech, they talk about different means of signaling. If that's through a flare, Jay talked about being reflective. You know, I love that he just said, go down to basics, go down to old school. I mentioned map and compass, like old school works, right? We think we have all these gadgets that will do this and that. I have actually heard of people carrying flares as that emergency signal. Off it goes. We don't list that in our essentials. We don't speak about that. Bear bangers, again, you know, through our provincial resource, which is Wild Safe BC, they talk about making that connection with bears through human sound, which is our voices, right? And what we sound like versus a bear bell or that sort of thing. So, you know, not to steer away from them completely. Do we recommend them and speak about them? Not normally. No, we don't. We talk about other means of communication pre-adventure. The trip plan is that. Other means of communication, reflective gear. Jay mentioned it a few times. That can be right down to when you're shopping. Are you buying neutral colors, or you're buying bright, bold, and reflective? Think about this well before that outing, right? And how do we communicate with that visually, verbally? How are people going to hear you and see you? The whistle. Everybody who ever sees us at any event, find us, come over. We have an AdventureSmart whistle for you. We're passing out tools, and that's one of them. Make sure it's on the tab of your jacket for winter adventures, so it's really close to you in case you go into a tree well. Just one example. That emergency shelter that Jay mentioned and had there, I've got one in every pack that I carry for adventures, and it's used to keep warm and dry. His little system there looks like a great system with the few things he had packed. It's also a large reflective. So if it needed to be waved above you or brought out and pulled out very large, there's a large reflective something that these SAR volunteers could see you as a subject in need of help. So how we communicate with search and rescue is our responsibilities. I take that onus as well as an outdoor enthusiast. It's my job to communicate with the Devons, the Julies, and the Jays of the world, and the Scotts. And how do I communicate with you pre-adventure and if something goes wrong? So pre is my trip plan. My comms are in place. Out in the field, it's through my means of communication, which is my Communication devices, Garmin InReach, Spot, Zoleo, those are great primary examples of comms. Secondary is our phone. If it works, great. Do not go out thinking that's your primary. If you can really take away that about comms, that's key. And then how do you communicate out there? Let's say if some of those don't work. And we've all, 5 of us tonight have had some examples of how that could be visually, sounds being seen, being heard, stamping out a huge SOS in the snow for daylight visual to see, making large X's with branches and boughs and flora and fauna on top of the snow. 3 of anything is a signal for emergency distress, SOS. Obviously, most of us know what that means, save our souls, emergency. So there's many ways of that communication. Again, it starts at the beginning with that pre-trip plan. Take those devices, know how to use them, know what's primary and secondary, and then have those pieces in place so that when you need to visually, literally, and make sounds and be seen and heard by SAR. And that could be from them being on the ground. It could be from them being on a mountain bike, a snowmobile, or in a helicopter, or other means of travel.
I think I have about time for about 1 question for each of our panelists, and then we're probably going to be wrapping it up here. We're going to have to, I think we have a giveaway, don't we? I think we have to get to that too. So I'll give a nice quickie to Jay. Jennifer's asking about the 5x8 blue tarp. Is it available for purchase and where? Or like Jennifer was looking at sill tarps and says they're expensive, and she was wanting to know what
if Canadian Tire special.
Canadian Tire. There you go.
Yeah, and 5x8, 8x10, like, and they're under. I mean, if they're on sale, they're under $15.
Yeah, Canadian Tire has sales like every second week. So if it's not $15 right now, just wait a week.
Yeah.
Cool. Quickie to Devon. 2 questions, one from James, one from Tanya. James said, is a GPS like a Garmin adequate to replace a transceiver? So is a Garmin GPS the same as a transceiver? And then, well, let's do that one first, and then I'll ask you question B in a second here. Go ahead.
Great. So unfortunately, a Garmin will not replace the transceiver. If you are caught in an avalanche, they're not going to be able to find you. So if you only had the funds for one particular piece of equipment and you're going into avalanche terrain, I would recommend you can't go in without a transceiver, essentially. And that always needs to be close to your body. And so typically the best spot is they make harnesses with them. They always kind of go on your belly because that's kind of closest, your biggest part of you, at least in my case. If someone's probing for you and you're buried, that they're gonna probe where your transceiver is. So if it's in a pocket in your leg, first of all, that can get torn off. And second of all, if they probe your foot, it's going to take them a long time to shovel to get to your head. So we always recommend keeping it higher up. The Garmin, if you don't hit depending on what subscription you're paying for, if you're buried, well, likely you might not even be tracking. A lot of people keep it off until they're in an emergency situation. If they are tracking, it'll take a really long time for maybe somebody else in your group doesn't have a Garmin to track that's tracking you. I don't know why they would be doing that. So I would highly recommend against having a Garmin.
Okay, yeah. So don't rely on your personal locator beacon. Don't rely on your satellite transceiver. Neither of those are the same as a avalanche transceiver. Right?
That's correct.
Cool. So one last question. Avalanche beacon or avalanche transceivers, different brands. Like, so we've got avalanche transceiver by Black Diamond. We've got an avalanche transceiver by MEC, and it's MEC labeled. Do they work together?
All transceivers should be able to pick up any other transceiver. So is that wrong?
No, that's right. I said yay. I'm glad that it is, because that way I don't have to worry. I can just go buy the cheapest. And they all have the same standards that they live to, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, there's definitely a range in prices. Like the Memo Berry Vox S has some special features that are great for professionals, but not necessarily necessary for kind of just a regular backcountry recreationalist who just wants to make sure they're being safe and responsible. I'm also a big fan of Simple, for folks that, if you've just taken your AST1 and you're just getting to kind of know the backcountry and avalanche terrain, the simpler and easier to use a tool is, the more likely you're going to use it and have it with you and use it properly. So you don't need all the fancy features. Just look for, if it's within your price range, just get that one.
Good advice. Julie, you're going to take the last question for our panelists today. Ran asks, what can you say to someone who's hesitant to call for help because they're concerned about the bad reputation they might get and the comments they'll get in the media, and maybe even showing their walk of shame on the evening news? Now, NSR tends to get a fair bit of media coverage. What would you say to a person who's hesitant about calling?
Yeah, I would say that our priority is what is in our real lives, not our virtual or media lives, and that's getting home safe. So situation, you can call in. When you call in, it doesn't mean that we are going to send in the cavalry as soon as you do so. We have a conversation with you. If we have two-way communications, we figure out what your need is. Maybe we just provide you with the route information you need to get back to your car. So it doesn't mean that you're going to launch a huge rescue. So that's one thing, is if you're unsure, just call in and just call 911 first. Don't call your friend or your family member, just talk to us. We are really friendly. And the second point I would say is we are really happy to help. That's why we're all on this webinar. That's why we all volunteer hundreds of hours a year, is we want to be there for you. So please, if you need us, call us and we will help you out. When I say that sometimes it takes a while for us to get there, we're trying. We really are trying to get there. So we will do our best. And in terms of the media, any interview, etc., that you do is voluntary. We have conversations with people after rescues. We do a debrief with them. And at that point, it's really about whether you want to contribute to public education through being on the news, which I'm very grateful to say a lot of our subjects do voluntarily say that they will, their gratitude, etc. So it's not something that is going to happen if you give us a call, but it is something that we really appreciate when people take the time to do public education and never read the comments. I don't read them. Don't read them. So that's it for me.
And one thing I will also say, like, I'm from Coquitlam Search and Rescue. We're just the next door over, and of the number of times we're out searching and rescuing people, maybe 1/20th of them have any kind of media, right? So the chances that there's and it might even be less than that, the chances that you're actually going to have the media there, it might seem like they're on the news every day, but that's because there are 78 groups in the province, and there's a lot. The number of callouts, what's the number of callouts that we have per year, Sandra?
2,000. 2,000
callouts. You don't see 5 media walks of shame per day, right? In fact, you don't even see one per day. It's usually maybe once a week. And so the chance that you will actually be involved with the media, pretty darn small. Thank you very much. There's other questions, and I just want to thank everyone who submitted questions, and I apologize for not being able to get to everyone's question. But I do think a lot of people are hanging around because they want to have a chance to get a free avalanche skills training course, which I am envious of because I want to go on it. And Sandra won't give it to me because I was involved in this.
Sorry. Little conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to award this as well. And thank you for everyone who has stuck around to the end. But I think it's been great conversation, amazing insights from Jay from your region to really get a gist of what it's like for you. Awesome shares. Good luck with all that ski waxing, by the way. Devon, awesome stories and great insights too from Lions Bay. Great story. It kind of brings it to light and brings it to the surface. And as one of the busiest regions in SAR groups, Julie, NSR is a busy group, and I know there's a lot to tackle there between media. I really like that last question, and I love that people are thinking that outside of an incident box, right? Because that is part of our whole system now. It is. It's the call, it's the media. And I look at those, and Julie, you hit the nail on the head. Those are opportunities to share best practices. And that's reliable information that Devon brought up, using that as where to gain that information. And AdventureSmart is that reliable resource. So amongst all of us, I think we shared some really helpful information for our audience tonight. And a really quick ask of me. So I'm going to start with you, Scott. If you had one thing you could wish for that enthusiasts would do from your perspective from Coquitlam SAR, what would your one wish be? These have to be quick, so we have a prize to give away. Scott, what's your best wish there?
Dial 911 early. As soon as you get in trouble, don't wait.
Perfect. Jay, what's your wish as a search and rescue volunteer?
Trip plans. I was on a call where every single thing was done wrong, except they said, if we're not back by 4, call 911, tell them we need search and rescue, we're here. We got them out, they were fine.
Love it. Julie, what would be your best wish? If you had a wand and you could just go, ding, what would that be?
That everyone comes home safe after their adventures to their friends and family.
Yeah, reaching their destination, which is home with their friends and family. And you brought that up in your session. Devon, last but not least, what's your wish?
Research where you're going to go. Don't count on Instagram. Except for the BC AdventureSmart one.
I was gonna say, I'm like, oh, Sandra, just leave it alone. Okay, yeah, except for ours. Ours is that reliable social platform, thanks to all the work we put into that. Okay, let's get to it. We're down to 8:28 by my clock. We have a wonderful offering from Canada West Mountain School. They are beautifully supportive of what we do. We've gotten a few courses from them in the last few winters. And tonight we have one of those to give away. So we have an avalanche skills training course, level 1, course 1. And this is how we do it here. So get your fingers ready. Sorry, not guests or Scott. Everyone else who's joined us and stayed. I'm going to ask a skill testing question. And it's in relation to some of the information we talked about tonight. And the first one to answer that question, now Scott, get your eyes ready, because you have to pick that first one that comes through. And then we'll arrange for the certificate to get to the winner. And I'm choosing this question because there's a lot involved in it. It talks about everything in conjunction to how you prepare and plan for based on this question. Can someone tell me what the average length of a search and rescue call is in BC?
A whole bunch of people can tell you what the average length of a quick search and rescue call. So many.
And what's the first one?
So many that I have to scroll up. And by the way, the answer, according to almost everyone, almost instantly, is 8 hours. Yeah. Aaron S. appears to be our winner. So I'm going to just text you privately, Aaron, and I need you to send me your email just in case it's not the same as the one that I have on file.
Awesome. Thank you for playing our game. And we're really excited, Aaron. I hope you enjoy the course. Canada West Mountain School puts on awesome programs all through the curriculum from Avalanche Canada. So it takes all of us to share this information with you, including the warm bodies here tonight. And on behalf of the 3,000 search and rescue volunteers in British Columbia and the BC Search and Rescue Association, thank you for getting informed before you go outdoors. If you want to join us again, we have 7 more webinars, 2 more next week, and then a bunch next year. You know where to find us. You found this one, and it's on our events page on BC AdventureSmart Facebook. Thank you very much, and have a great AdventureSmart winter. Good night, everyone.
Good night, folks.
Bye.
Thanks again.